Good evening, everyone. I am in my last week, up until Tuesday, of our 30-day challenge. And tonight I wanted to talk about love, but more from a philosophical perspective, I suppose. We've looked a lot over the last few sessions about how we perceive life, how we deal with life, what happens to us as children, all kinds of things that we've looked at in terms of how do we end up in the patterns that we end up in, how do we end up in painful places, repetitive patterns of difficult things, and what is really underpinning all this. So tonight I wanted to have a look at our understanding of love, but again from a slightly more philosophical perspective, I suppose. How do we end up in these patterns? We all want love, we all long for love, we seek it, and yet at the same time we're all actually quite terrified of it. And I know this from various exercises, I suppose, and plunges down the rabbit hole of deep process work and shamanic work. And when you get closer to that which you desire, the terror, which is actually the terror of the infant that was first denied love, I suppose. Remember, for an infant, a moment is an eternity, and they have no concept that something will come to an end. And so when we get close to that first time that love was denied, love equals pain, but it equals a pain that is beyond words, that is beyond comprehension to our adult self, who has learnt to reason to some degree. And so the closer we get to it, the more terrifying it is. What is it that we fear? We fear love. So in childhood, the infant is completely egocentric and what we would call naturally narcissistic. The whole world revolves around them. It's all about me. Now, if the baby's needs are met gently and lovingly over time, this narcissistic worldview changes and matures, and we grow, we become more adult. If our needs were not met effectively at various developmental stages as that went on, then we remain locked, and that's often the case, by the way. In fact, as I think I said one of the videos, the World Health Organization estimates that about 93% of families on the planet function this way. So this is a deeply embedded, multi-generational, epoch-organized way of worldview. So if our needs are not met in a predictable and safe way, then we remained locked in that worldview of how things exist. Not in the greater scheme of things, but how they exist to us. Are we safe or unsafe? And that's how the narcissists views the world out there. You know, infant love is, I love because I'm loved by you. I love you because I need you. That's what infantile love is. And it reflects what we would call an external locus of control, which I think we've dealt with before. But when you are insecure on the inside, when your needs weren't met and you can't safely predict, and everything you look at, you're evaluating from a narcissistic worldview as, is that safe to me or is it unsafe to me? And there is such a thing as healthy narcissism. And all the way up to the mad narcissist that many of us have encountered in life, it's all part of a spectrum. But in the early stages, the infant narcissism is quite normal, healthy, and reasonable. And as I said, if the needs aren't met, well, we end up quite insecure on the inside because we never quite know if our needs are going to be met or not. We will come to blame ourselves deep down inside. We can't bear that, so we reject that and project it onto others. And so we end up with this external locus of control that says, I'm okay. Hello, lovey. Miss Simone. I'm okay if my job's okay, if my family of origin's okay, if my work is okay, if my friendship circle is okay, And these days, if my Instagram account and my Facebook account are all okay, if they're all okay, I'm okay. Now, with mature, but of course, the thing to know about that, of course, is if any one of those tips up, if I blow my Instagram account out of the water by faking something that wasn't real and everyone trolls me, or if my relationship breaks down, or I have a fight with my father, or any of those things, or I lose my job, if any of those things goes pear-shaped in that infantile love of the worldview, then if any of those break down, we break down. If they're not okay, I am not okay. So that external locus of control belongs to that paralyzed, focused, infantile, narcissistic worldview of love. Mature love is the quite opposite when we've grown up, where we recognize I am loved because I do love. Where we don't see the other in how it exists in relation to ourselves, but we see it more objectively. We've learnt to reason. We've learnt to see it outside of our own fears and our own desires. We have grown what is known as an internal locus of control, so that we have become steady on the inside. We can reason about what's out there, how it works. We can view things objectively, not in terms of how they relate to me, but how they relate to themselves and the world. And so we have this, we're much more steady on the inside. And so if the relationship breaks down, yes, there is pain and grief, but we can understand that this will pass. If the job fails, we are much more likely to view it objectively and, well, doors close and doors open. And if your Instagram account blows up, well, often people from that place wouldn't probably not have one or would care less even if they did, kind of thing. So they've moved from that external locus of control, I'm okay as long as everything else is out there is okay and looking after me, to an internal locus of control where that it doesn't matter what's going on out there, that I'm okay because I'm okay within myself. Now, how does all this happen? How does it end up like this, where we've got a vast swathe of people with an external locus of control and few with an internal locus of control? We have to come to this place ultimately. That's freedom, okay? We are all grown up in an environment of infantile narcissism in the world. It is very deliberately and powerfully constructed that way. The patriarchy, which is the epoch that we have lived in for the last 13,000 years, the last 2,500 in particular, and the handmaiden of that, toxic capitalism, cannot exist without pushing infantile narcissism on the world. For how else can things be commodified and sold back to you in an endless cycle of consumption to fill the void that cannot be filled from out there with the external locus of control, but can only be filled from within when you have learned to love yourself and reason with the world and objectively view it, not about how it relates to you, but how it relates to itself. But as I said, the system that we all dwell in pushes the void experience so that it can keep getting you to buy things to try and fill it. The system requires people to conform to a mediocrity, for it requires the infantile program of the pursuit of happiness. And there has been more interesting research on the pursuit of happiness and what a crock of gobshite it is, really, okay? Happiness is a fleeting, transient emotion. It comes and it goes. And so to pursue it endlessly, you can't hold it endlessly because it's a fleeting emotion like all other emotions. And all other emotions that you feel and experience, they are the weather of your existence. They are the storm clouds that come and go. They are the lightning bolts. They are the gentle rain. But you are the clear blue sky above it all. And that's the place you have to find. But we are fed by this pursuit of happiness. You've got to be happy. You've got to do this, be this, get this. And because we can't have it all the time, then we start consuming things to try and be there. And this ends up with men in life needing to be successful in order to be loved. And women need to be attractive in order to be loved. And all of this needing to be successful, needing to be attractive, needing to be seen, to be validated, to be stroked, is all emerging from the omnipotent sense of the narcissistic child state. See me, value me, I am special. And while it's appropriate for a baby and a small child to experience life that way, it doesn't work as an adult, but it is constantly pushed by the world that we live in, the capitalist world of patriarchy that we live in, because that grows and keeps the whole cycle going. And all at the same time, during this process, we are fed the lie of individualism, how special we are, how unique we are, okay? And we end up being slaves without chains, believing that they need to be loved, rather than developing the capacity to love another, beginning with themselves. In a world where a child grows with its needs being met, the narcissism resolves, and we develop a humility, an acceptance that we are part of a much bigger reality, a grain of sand on the ocean, precious and beautiful, but no more precious or beautiful than any other grain of sand on the ocean. And out of that comes this ability to reason. Infantile love that the system feeds wants it all handed over. Give it to me, give it to me. We are empty and we take in. Hi, Tanya. So we are empty, we have the whole within us, and we take in. And with mature love or adult love, we give love and are not afraid of the giving. And for the giving reflects the strength and power and aliveness of our nature. We are full and give out. Now, this stuff that I'm talking to you about is from Erich Fromm, and, very clever human that works with the mind back in the 40s, 50s, I think. But he wrote a wonderful little book called The Art of Loving. Hi, Zara. And I strongly recommend you read it. It's a really good book. Erich Fromm, The Art of Loving. It's only about that thick. But it really, I'm sharing some of this stuff at the moment from him. So infantile love is fear-based, controlling. It wants it all. It becomes incredibly defensive and possessive. They are a prisoner of their own making, and they want to imprison everybody else in the same scenario. That's a classic at the other end of the spectrum of health, narcissist, okay? And we've all dealt with them in some form or another, okay? They have to have the best bottle of wine, the best car, the best house, the best woman, be barracking for the best sports team or be part of it, or they need the best man or the best job or the best wedding or the best baby or the best party or the best outfit, constantly needing that external validation that they are special. And they are unable to be by themselves. And that's what you need. You need to learn to be by yourself in order to discover the maturity, the ability to reason and discover that you are part of a larger whole. So these people with this very infantile face of love cannot be alone without very soon becoming irritable, bored, and needing to do something with their hands or their mouth, okay? And social media, the fear of missing out. Indeed. If you're going to have the best of everything. It is true. And of course, social media, with all of its wonderful myriad of connection, which I love, also feeds this process of the fear of missing out, because people only put up the good stuff that they want to share with their friends. People are feeling miserable. They like to be alone with it and try and work it out. But it becomes so consuming that people actually then start making things up to put on their social media or their Instagram accounts, because they're so desperately trying to fill the void of all this that not only are their own lives inadequate to the task, but then they'll start making things up until they get sprung, and then it all blows up in their face, which makes it 10 times worse. For these people, being loved is being popular. And because we can't be that all the time in our mind because we don't believe it anyway, then consumption is the next best thing. We're ever hopeful that whatever we possess, own, buy, have, demonstrate, we're ever hopeful that that will meet the need. And of course, because it can't, because only we can do that, then we are always disappointed. And to be loved in this way, you know, to think that you're getting love because of merit, because you've got the best car, the best party, the best this, the best that, it always leaves us in doubt, with the fear that if I got it from that and then I'm not good enough, then love could always leave me. Terrifying. Mature love, on the other hand, adult love, is vulnerable, willing to share itself. It's detached. It's courageous. It's committed and all-encompassing. It's a choice. People exist, not in some egoic, symbiotic, needy attachment kind of way, but encompassing all life. It's Martin Buber's I and Thou approach, another great book worth reading. Martin Buber, great guy. I and Thou. Not it as such, but awareness of all within the one. I and thou are the same, not separate. We preserve our own integrity while piercing the wall of separation, if that makes sense, okay? We are perceiving everything from the center of oneself, being one with the other by being fully with ourselves, rather than fleeing from the other, which in fact means we are fleeing from ourselves. From that mature place, we are desiring for the other growth for their own sake, not for meeting my needs, but for growing for their own sake. The response to the problem of existence, and the problem of existence is profound, and existential anxiety, as we have alluded to before, profoundly nauseating. But the response to the problem of that existence that we are all a part of is love. It's the only response. It's not our place to feel secure by possession or defense or control, but to learn to tolerate insecurity, to understand this is the way it is, and come to terms with it, to be okay with it. And it's true, Kelly, we are never completely fulfilled. We are all works in progress. We are all on a spectrum of growth. There is no destination. And probably one of the best examples of how this game plays out for all of us is what's known as the drama triangle. Now, some of you may be familiar with that. Some of you may not. But it shows how the triangle, the games we play, persecutor, rescuer, victim. And we can play this in our head. We certainly play it with other people when we're caught in the drama. It's all built on lies and pain, and the only way out is through the persecutor position. You're not being a persecutor, but you will be perceived that way. But in fact, you're standing in your own truth and choosing other. Now, if people would like, I'm happy to try and link that here somehow later, where have a read of it. It's really valuable information. It's quite eye-opening. And we do it in our heads, and we do it with each other, and we do it with our family, and we do it with our work colleagues, and it gets in the way all the time, and it comes from this infantile love. We all know these people, don't we? You know, they know everything. They're very controlling. And they're always blaming. You know, it's never their fault. They can be quite violent, verbally, emotionally. You know, they have no self-awareness, none, zip, zilch. They lie to themselves as much as they lie to you. They're filled and riddled with secrets, and so are their lives. They play the yes but game, the yes but game. It's a game out of transactional analysis. And basically, if you try and reason with such people from this infantile loving place, who are coming from that infantile love, that narcissistic terror, and you try and explain the other person's point of view, or you try and explain how things work generally, it's all, yeah, but no, I'm special. Those rules might apply to everybody in the universe, but I'm special. So they play the yes but game. Very frustrating to be around. They have very poor and inappropriate anger management, okay? Their anger response to the world when they're thwarted can be really everything from violent rage to passive manipulation to control by all other means where they hide themselves most powerfully. They don't care, by the way. They really are lacking in empathy. They don't care about anything, and they cannot be trusted. If they're being nice to you, they're setting you up for something, okay? 9 out of 10 times, that's how it works. So, yeah, Kelly, I'll post that thing for you guys. Love that. How to understand when you're caught in the game of the drama triangle with someone who's on this spectrum of narcissism and is not taking responsibility for their own life. They've got that external locus of control, and how to walk away from it, how to step away from it powerfully, okay? The most important thing to remember when you're dealing with these people and they gaslight you all the time is it's not about you. It's not your problem, okay? They will do everything in their power to convince you that it's your problem, but it's not. One of the first things you have to understand. And so in the meantime, we've all come to live in this patriarchal, capitalistic world of mediocrity where everything is prescribed for us. What fun is prescribed for us. What films we watch is prescribed for us. The advertising around all that is pushed into us. And we end up all living the same, a uniform, stifling existence where man's labours are prescribed and unfulfilling, disconnected from the finished product, in the way that Marx so powerfully described. Until we forget what we are, lost in this baleful hopelessness, unloved and unloving and forever not enough, and constantly needing to prove ourselves in the world and get it right and look good and be right in order to not ever have to face that emptiness within ourselves. And again, we can't sit still without getting bored or irritable, because suddenly it starts to percolate and we've got to do something, we've got to eat something, we've got to drink something, we've got to do something with our fingers. We dress the same. We believe the same. We think the same and feel the same. We all pretend we're not, by the way, because of that individual trope that's fed to us. But look around you, everyone toes the party line. And it saves us from the narcissistic terror of aloneness, while in fact these very actions are perpetuating the terror of our separation, thus kind of forbidding an overcoming of it, burying under mediocrity the innate desire for growth and transcendence in some Aldous Huxley Brave New World kind of utopian nightmare, well-fed, well-clad, empty and alone. I've talked about Marcuse a couple of times here. Herbert Marcuse, One-Dimensional Man, Eros and Civilization. He's written many other things, of course. But as he says in One-Dimensional Man, we live in this totalitarian, and this society is totalitarian. It doesn't have to be communist to be totalitarian. We live in this totalitarian dystopia where the masses are powerfully numbed and manipulated to meet the vested interests of the few by all means at their disposal. And they've rigged the game in such a way that they control most of the wealth and most of the means and most of the media. So they just keep pumping into us whatever they think that they want us to buy, they will feed it to us. It's that simple, okay? And they've got all the resources and all the means of disposal at their hand to do this. There's a terror in those that run the system, in their mindset, that if we let this transcendent, primal, self-real love rise, our primal nature, remember and rise, it will threaten the very existence of the manipulators. They're right. It does. And that's why we're kept so mind-numbingly asleep over and over again. Stay still, stay down, eat this, drink this. Don't rock the boat. Don't question. Don't do any of those things. And then there are 1,000 theories and therapies that are espoused to maintain the status quo, of keeping the primal self at bay. It's not safe to let it out. You can't do that. And this lie, told often enough and completely enough, becomes reality. Goebbels was right about that, okay? Repeat the lie often enough and people come to believe it and behave accordingly. There's no such thing as a stupid child, for example. But you tell a beautiful, precious, unfolding, exquisite, beautiful jewel of the universe often enough that it is stupid, it will believe it. And then for the rest of its life, it'll do stupid things. Okay, it's not stupid, but it'll behave accordingly, okay? So seriously, there's a whole worldview out there supporting this dysfunctional world we live in. There are therapy books, there are important books written about why we have to not transcend, why we have to keep the id at bay, why we have to perform and conform to the status quo. But it's just a terror by the system and by the people in the system who are all empty with their external locuses of control, terrified that if the real love emerges, the adult and mature love emerges, love for full self, for ourselves first, and then recognizing with humility and reason that we are one of 1 trillion grains of sand on the beach and all are perfect. Yes, that will break the system down. This whole system that's disguised by elections, just because we're having elections doesn't mean the master-slave relationship doesn't exist. It does. Have you seen who you get to choose from? Seriously? Are you watching what's happening to Western democracies around the world? And this pap finds ever more pleasant ways for you to be distracted. There's flasher cars and better movies and CGI and better drugs and better food, and will distract you by pretending that you're being healthy as we fill your head and your time and your space with meals about this and meals about that, and you can pretend that you're doing the right thing by yourself. And in the meantime, this system genuinely and powerfully exports itself across the world like a plague into developing and non-industrialized countries where people who were once primally themselves and outrageously happy, and if you've ever been to a third world country, it's remarkable how happy they are, even though they have nothing compared to us. But then we start feeding into them, you've got to have this, you've got to have that, you've got to have this, and you've got to have that. We become stupefied, alone in our misery and suffering, thinking we're the only ones feeling or dying like this on the inside. But in truth, everyone's feeling the same. And we live in a society where the desire for freedom, the innate primal nature that wants to rise and transcend moment by moment throughout its existence, that very desire for freedom and the rebellion that says no to the stupefaction of self becomes a psychopathology, supported by important books, the Diagnostic Manual for Psychiatric Disorders, blah, 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 the ICD-11, the DSM-5 or 6 or whatever it is now, okay? So that desire to rise, that desire to rebel, instead of being the expression of the true self emerging, becomes a psychopathology that requires exclusion and more stupefaction with drugs. And we all know how profound that reality has become in this current day and age, with over 600,000 Americans dying every year from an opioid crisis that was created by the system. For God's sake. And in the meantime, then everybody else gets treated like a child that can't take a drug without a doctor's prescription because of this. It's just this spiraling, self-fulfilling prophecy of madness. Solitude is what we need. That's what is required to find oneself. Walk in the forest alone, preferably in the rain, as one or two of my friends would say. Walking alone is where often some really great, powerful thoughts come to be. But you need to be by yourself. You need to be alone from time to time. Many, 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 many years ago, my father, who was worked on the land all his life, but as a youngster, before he went to the Second World War, he worked on one of the Kidman properties. He worked on many of them, and became a station manager when he came back from the war and married my mum, and we were all born out there in the back of Bourke. But as a younger man, as a kid really, 17, and he was a boundary rider on the Kidman properties. And he had a horse and a dog and 3 months' supply of tea and sugar and salt, and he killed his own food, etc. But he would be out on a boundary hut, and then he would ride and make sure the fences were all okay. And every few weeks, the mail truck would come along and leave some more tea and rice and whatever he ate in those days, kind of thing, that which he wasn't killing. But he spent a long time alone with his horse and his dog. And I remember him saying to me years later about what a powerful experience it was for him, and that until you can actually be by yourself, with yourself, you cannot grow up. You cannot discover who you are. And this is very, very true, okay? So solitude is required, from which hope and self and art can arise. We live in a world where it's technically bloody impossible to be alone. Seriously, it's technically impossible. And yet it is required for you to discover what lies within. As Nietzsche says, in individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs of time, it is the rule. Okay? An epoch is ending right now. A 2,500 year one, a 13,000 year one. Let us use it to break free. He also says, that sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. We all have to find our own way. You have yours, I have mine. And as Nietzsche says, as for the right way, the correct way, the only way, which is what we get fed every day, it does not exist. We've come to live in a world where doubting the status quo, where doubting the system has become a sin in and of itself. This is more of Nietzsche, when he says that Christianity has done its utmost to close the circle very tight and declared even doubt to be a sin. And he went on to say, and I can speak from the voice of experience, a casual stroll through the lunatic asylum shows that faith does not prove anything, okay? He says that the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe, by the conformity, the demand that we all be the same, we pray the same, we beat the drum the same, we dress the same, we march to the same, everything, okay? We've always had to struggle to not be overwhelmed by that. If you try to be different, if you try to step outside of that parameter, but as Heidegger himself says, you must, in the second part of the tripartite nature of being, you must extract yourself from it. Figure out who you are before you insert yourself back. But you will pay a high price for this. You will be lonely often and frightened sometimes. But as Nietzsche says, no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Herein lies the path to love. Nietzsche also said, the snake which cannot cast its skin has to die. As well the minds which are prevented from changing, they cease to be mine. He said, and this is a wonderful book to read, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It's another small one, but Nietzsche is a genius anyway. But thus spoke Zarathustra. In it, he said, you must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How else could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? We must be the phoenix of our own reality. He spoke again about love, that one must learn to love. Like he says about music, that it requires some exertion and goodwill to tolerate it in spite of its strangeness, to be patient with its appearance and expression, and kind-hearted about its oddity, until it continues to compel and enchant us relentlessly, until we have become its humble and enraptured lover who desires nothing better from the world than it, and only love. In the end, we are always rewarded for our goodwill, our patience, our fair-mindedness and gentleness with it, with what is strange in this self-love, this awakening. Gradually, it sheds its veil and turns out to be a new and indescribable beauty. Those who love themselves will have learned it in this way, for there is no other way. Love too has to be learned, he says. And yet aren't we so powerfully admonished for loving ourselves? Up yourself. Or if we love ourselves, you're selfish. So everything is designed to constrain us, to keep us in that uniform of conformity, living lives with external locuses of control where we consume to fill the void that cannot be filled. The opposite is true. The very opposite is true. Oh God, here comes Isis again. Shh. We're almost at the end. Hello, darling. Yes, ever so nice. And so we must do this. We must find a way to be alone. We must tease out the strangeness of love. Familiarize ourselves with it. Allow the transcendent primal self to arise. And in that we can find the mature love, the humble love, the reasoned, objective love that no longer requires that external validation, but gives love to the world because that is the power and force and aliveness of its being. And it becomes a beacon because it's genuinely what everyone wants. So a little philosophical rambling tonight, perhaps. So thank you all. I'm loving that you're tuning in and giving me some great feedback. And tomorrow, I'm not sure what we'll talk about, but I'll see you again about the same time. And Miss Isis has come to stalk us all. Yes, you tell them, lovey. So thank you all, my darlings, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Thanks again.